studios in New York, here again is Stone Phillips.
Welcome to our second hour of Dateline. When you're headed down the interstate, you probably don't worry a lot about hitting another car head-on. It's rare on divided highways. But that's exactly what happened in the story you're about to see. A horrible high-speed collision killed two brothers after a car went south in a northbound lane. Who was driving the car? The answer seemed obvious at first. But in this case, what seemed obvious was anything but. Here's Sarah James.
It was just after midnight, 2 days before Thanksgiving, 1999. I-95 north of Fort Lauderdale, Florida was clear, visibility perfect, but something terrible was about to happen.
There was a car traveling down the wrong way down the highway.
And before police could respond, more calls.
There's a major accident on I-95. I think it just happened. One of the cars looks like it's going to go on fire, and there's people in them, and it's like a mess.
It was clear from the wreckage that two cars had hit head-on, and one of them had been going the wrong way. But which one? In the light-colored Kia, two brothers were killed instantly. In the other car, a dark green Honda, was an FBI agent rushed to a local hospital in critical condition. The Kia was resting on its side against the median, pointing in the wrong direction, south in the northbound lane. The FBI agent's car was pointing the right way, north. Was that the way they were driving? The Highway Patrol concluded just that and issued a press release hours later saying the Kia was going the wrong way. But the mother of the two young men who died didn't buy it. Something was very wrong, she said, something that seemed like law enforcement sticking together. What's more, she thought the whole thing reeked of racism.
This was the first Christmas we were going to Disney.
Florence Thompson last saw her sons just before midnight on the night of the accident. Maurice, 23, a salesman for Coca-Cola, married with a 6-year-old son, was going to drive 19-year-old Craig back to college, where he was studying computer engineering. When she didn't hear from her sons by 3 a.m., Thompson got in her car to search for them and came upon the accident scene.
I was praying it in my heart, saying, please God, don't let it be them. I pulled up by the trooper and I asked him what happened. And he said there was a deadly accident. He told me that he was sorry. My boys didn't make it.
Thompson was told her two sons died in a head-on crash and that they were going the wrong way.
Did they ever drink or use drugs?
Nope.
They were both then very religious.
Very religious, very dedicated to their church and their friends and family also.
In fact, Maurice and Craig, both preachers, had been here at the Shiloh Pentecostal Church just before the accident.
They were at choir rehearsal. I know these young men, and they don't have any part with drugs or alcohol.
So why did she think the Highway Patrol blamed her sons?
Because they were two young black boys.
And the other person involved in the accident?
Was a white FBI. He flashed his badge that night at the accident scene when the troopers came up and told him that he was an FBI agent.
Agent David Farrell, a 10-year veteran of law enforcement and a giant of a man, 6'3" and 310 pounds. But Florence Thompson was unfazed. She knew her sons. She did TV interviews proclaiming their innocence.
Tomorrow's my son's birthday, so, well, how do you expect me to feel?
And organized protests challenging the official findings. The autopsies showed no alcohol or drugs in the brothers, but a rescue worker revealed that he'd thought someone had been drinking, but not the young men. He'd smelled alcohol on the agent's breath. Reporter Artie Friedberg dug out the real story.
We started to work our sources and fairly quickly found out there was alcohol involved.
At the scene, the Highway Patrol hadn't considered Agent Farrell a suspect and hadn't ordered a blood test. But the Florida Sun-Sentinel learned Farrell's blood had been tested that night at the hospital and that his blood alcohol level had been twice the legal limit. That story was confirmed 2 weeks later when state troopers subpoenaed hospital records. Agent Farrell had been legally drunk.
We made some mistakes, and I admit that readily.
Almost a month after the accident, the Highway Patrol did a 180, saying Farrell had caused the accident, not the brothers, and apologizing for what it suggested was a flawed first report.
It's been determined from the physical evidence that the Farrell vehicle was in fact going the wrong way on the interstate at the time of the collision.
Farrell was charged with 2 counts of DUI manslaughter and faced up to 30 years in jail. He was also fired by the FBI. And it turned out that Farrell's drinking partner the night of the accident was none other than his FBI supervisor, who never disclosed that fact to accident investigators.
I wouldn't use the word cover-up, but they certainly weren't forthcoming with any information.
And there was more. In the days following the accident, FBI agents had not allowed investigators to interview Farrell in his hospital room. And then there was the missing cup. Photos taken that night at the scene show a large cup in the front seat of Farrell's car. FBI agents were allowed to remove some of Farrell's personal items from the Bureau car. Later, it was discovered the cup had disappeared. Prosecutor Michael Horowitz.
Do you believe that that cup might have contained alcohol?
There's no way to ever know, because it's gone.
Florida's governor demanded a complete review of the case. That report concluded the Highway Patrol did a sloppy job investigating the crash and jumped to conclusions about who was responsible, but found no cover-up by state troopers. But the report was much harsher on the FBI, saying the agents' actions bordered on criminal malfeasance. The FBI's response:
information that's come to the FBI's attention has been shared with FHP.
With all the negative publicity, Farrell's defense attorney, Bruce Udolph, had an uphill battle, but quickly took the offensive.
I'm saying that drinking had nothing to do with that accident.
And if drinking had nothing to do with the accident, then it had to be the young men who caused it.
Right.
So you're saying the 2 young sober guys caused the accident?
I think that's right.
But the prosecution is ready to open its case with a witness who suggests Agent Farrell implicated himself with his own comments at the scene.
There was a point that he had asked me if he was going the right way.
Will the defense be able to convince the jury that the FBI agent was not responsible for the accident?
A car goes the wrong way down the interstate, crashing head-on into another car. 2 brothers are killed. The brothers were sober. The other driver, an FBI agent, had been declared legally drunk. The question of who was to blame seemed clear until the jury heard from the eyewitnesses. Once again, Sarah James.
FBI agent David Farrell was used to being in court. He'd testified in dozens of cases. But this time in a Broward County courtroom, he was the one on trial, facing 2 counts of DUI manslaughter in the wrong way head-on collision that killed 2 young black men.
You would think that common sense would tell you, if I got up in my opening statement and said, you're going to hear about a crash, a car was going the wrong way. One person was at a bar drinking all night. The 2 sober people were at choir practice. I think that alone should tell you who was going the wrong way.
When you put it that way, it sounds like a prosecutorial slam dunk.
If it ended just right there, yes, but because of the confusion that took place early on in the case, it wasn't.
It wasn't that simple?
No.
In November 2002, 3 long years after the accident, the trial finally got underway.
There's no way that 2 sober young men were driving the wrong way on 95.
To establish how much Farrell had to drink, the state called the FBI supervisor, who had been with him that night.
If I had thought that there was any way on earth that Dave was impaired at all, I would never have let him drive.
Prosecutors showed the jury the bar tab. They'd ordered 2 pitchers and a pint of beer. The supervisor testified he'd only had 2 glasses. Farrell drank the rest, nearly 2 gallons of beer. As to why he never told the highway patrol about the drinking,
as soon as I got to the hospital, the second I got brought up into that room, I went right to the next person up in the chain of command, right to the associate special agent in charge and told him that David and I had been out and that we had been drinking. So I was not trying to hide anything from anybody.
But you never passed that information on to anyone before Highway Patrol, did you?
I never saw anybody from the Florida Highway Patrol at the hospital. Never.
the prosecution played a 911 tape it said confirmed Farrell was at fault because the caller identified a dark vehicle, similar in color to the agent's, headed in the wrong direction.
He's all the way at the left lane, and he's traveling the opposite way.
You know what color the vehicle is?
Black car.
What's more, the prosecution said Farrell was implicated by his own words. One witness who tried to help Farrell at the scene says the agent asked if he was responsible for the accident.
There was a point that he had asked me if he was going the right way.
And the lead investigator testified that it was in fact the defendant's car going the wrong way.
The vehicle shouldn't have been where they were if the agent's vehicle had been going the right direction.
Prosecutors used science to bolster their case, calling upon crash reconstruction experts. A computer animation demonstrated the conclusions. The cars hit, then spun, and wound up facing the opposite direction from which they came.
An example would be if I walk into you with my right shoulder and I bump your right shoulder, we're going to spin around in a clockwise fashion. When you start looking at the damage to both these cars and putting them together, this is where the law of physics come in.
I'll tell you, Sir Isaac Newton is probably turning over in his grave.
When it came time for the defense to make its case, attorney Bruce Udolph didn't even try to refute the experts. He dismissed them.
I believe I referred to them as snake oil salesmen.
Why did you call them that?
Because I think they're professional witnesses.
The defense also countered that 911 call identifying a dark car headed the wrong way by introducing 4 eyewitnesses who said it had been a light car, like the one belonging to the brothers, going in the wrong direction.
Describe the vehicle that you observed going in the wrong direction. I remember it being a white car.
I thought it was like a Honda Accord or something like that, or a Honda Civic, light colored, like a white or a light gray.
And the defense used the testimony of one of those eyewitnesses to try to explain how 2 sober young men could have gotten turned around on a major interstate. That witness said he'd seen the light car make a U-turn in the northbound lanes for reasons no one could explain. What's more, another of the eyewitnesses noticed an extra feature about the light car which was significant.
It was a light-colored car. It was driving with its parking lights on.
The reason the defense considered that information crucial, a crime scene photo of the headlight switch in the Kia showed it was turned to the parking light's position. Next up for the defense, to try to refute the blood test that showed the FBI agent's alcohol level at twice the legal limit.
I mean, he was 309 pounds. It was a solid mass of muscle. He's 6'3". I mean, a pitcher of the kind used at the Quarterdeck restaurant, looks almost like a Dixie cup next to him.
So you did a test.
So we said, well, maybe Dave just metabolizes alcohol differently from every other human being. So maybe we'll see if we can just dose him up with the same food and drink he had that night and see what happens.
With the court's approval and with the camera rolling, Farrell drank 2 pitchers and a pint of beer. And he ate the same food he had the night of the accident: a hamburger, chicken wings, baked potato, and jalapeno poppers.
You're on blood draw number 4.
A doctor and nurse monitored his blood alcohol.
What did you think your test showed?
That if he drank all of what he and John Raleigh had ordered that night and ate what what the bar tab showed he had eaten, that he would have been 0.04, which again under Florida law is legally sober.
Of course, what the prosecutor says is, we bet he had more than that to drink.
No one saw him drinking any other alcohol other than the beer that was had at the restaurant.
It was quite a stunt, but the prosecutor objected to the test and the judge agreed. The jurors couldn't consider it in their deliberations, so there was one tactic left.
I call Dave Farrell.
The defense thought Agent Farrell himself was the best person to convince jurors that, despite such a high blood alcohol level, he hadn't been drunk and hadn't been driving the wrong way. But putting him on the stand would be risky, especially during cross-examination.
You would have testified that night that you had your share of at least the 2 pitchers and the pint of beer, correct?
Me and John split the 2 pitchers, and I know I had the pint. I probably had the majority of it, I would say, yes.
Mr. Farrell, you didn't use good judgment that night that you went to quarterdeck, did you?
Yes, I did.
Did you use good judgment that night when you drank as much as you did and you had a firearm with you? Was that good judgment?
I didn't drink a lot that night.
Did you use good judgment as much as you drank that night, getting behind the wheel of the car and driving? Was that good judgment?
I wasn't impaired.
As much as you drank that night, did you think you drive better when you're drinking or when you're not drinking?
Well, I think you probably drive better when you're not drinking. But if you're not impaired, I don't think it makes a difference.
Over and over, Farrell maintained he wasn't impaired. But what about those statements he made the night of the accident?
The first thing you said was I going the right way?
I didn't say that. I said, I believe if it was Mr. Worthington's testimony, I believe he said it was in the right lane or left lane.
And if the other car had been driving with only its parking lights on, how could Farrell explain this?
Isn't true that when last thing you remember that night before the crash is seeing headlights? Isn't that true?
You know, I thought of this probably 1,000 times, Mr. Horace. The last thing I saw was the flash of light, and the next thing I knew I was waking up in the accident. You know, it could have been parking lights, the airbag, the lights of the vehicles around me. It was just like a bright white flash, and you know, next thing I know I was in the accident.
Isn't it true that being tired and all the alcohol you drank that night, that's what caused you to get confused and go the wrong way that night?
Mr. Horace, I didn't go the wrong way. There's no doubt in my mind I didn't go the wrong way.
Was the defendant convincing? Did he plant reasonable doubt in the minds of the jury? Would he go free, or would he go to jail for as long as 30 years?
The jurors struggled to decide who was traveling the wrong way.
We had, was it 4 witnesses that come in and said that they were light-colored cars? We never did have a witness come into court and say there was a dark-colored car going the wrong way on 95.
For jurors, it was a baffling case. The defendant, an FBI agent, had been legally drunk when his car collided head-on with a car driven by 2 young brothers, both of whom were killed in the crash. But the question was, whose car had been headed in the wrong direction down the interstate? What would the jury decide? Once again, Sarah James.
It was now up to a Florida Superior Court jury of 3 men and 3 women to decide the fate of former FBI agent David Farrell. Jurors' backgrounds were as varied as their opinions of the evidence: a bus driver, a student, a realtor, a retiree, and 2 printers. All 6 jurors spoke to Dateline and recalled the enormous pressure as deliberations began to determine if Farrell had been drunk, if he'd been reckless, and if he'd caused the accident.
We were deciding the fate of a man, you know, the rest of his life, really. And not just that, there was 2 people who were my age that died, and I mean, there's the mother sitting there every day watching us.
You can't base your verdict on your emotions. You have to base it on the facts.
Right.
From the start, jurors were critical of law enforcement.
What were your feelings about how the Florida Highway Patrol handled the investigation of this accident?
Terrible. Very bad. It seemed they were very sloppy.
Jurors told us that the Highway Patrol's oversights at the accident scene, rush to judgment in blaming the brothers, and subsequent flip-flop claiming the agent was at fault made it difficult to pin down the facts.
They assumed automatically they had a slam dunk deal, and they left it that way until they had pressure.
Why do you think that they immediately assumed the two young black men were...
Because they were two young black men.
You think race was a factor?
I think so, yeah, at the beginning.
He told you the board showed the skid mark that was out on the roadway.
The prosecution, using experts, tried to overcome the problems with the Highway Patrol's investigation, and the jurors seemed impressed.
What about you, Manny? You felt like he was guilty.
It's just the science made sense to me.
For you, what was the strongest fact supporting the prosecution's case?
To me, the action reconstructionist, I definitely took that very seriously.
Jurors also took seriously the blood test that showed the defendant was drunk.
Was there any doubt in your mind that Agent Farrell was nearly twice the legal limit?
No doubt at all.
There was evidence presented by the defense that, look, I mean, he's a big guy. He wouldn't have been this drunk. Did you accept that? I mean, you know, in the words of his defense attorney, a pitcher of beer to him looks like a Dixie cup.
The guy was a big guy, but...
There was absolutely no way, you know, a pitcher was like a Dixie cup to anyone. You know, he was definitely drunk.
As for the star witness himself, Agent Farrell,
we pretty much disregarded his entire testimony because his testimony was basically hinged on whether he was drunk or not. And he just denied everything. So we pretty much just kind of threw it out. We didn't even pay attention to it.
If he was lying when he said, I wasn't impaired, then why wouldn't he also lie about whether or not he was traveling in the right direction?
Yeah, and the tragedy remains that we don't know how or why these boys are dead.
5 minutes into their deliberations, the jury settled the first issue.
We were all convinced that he was guilty of DUI. So we got that out of the way.
While jurors quickly decided Farrell was guilty of DUI, they had a harder time deciding if he was responsible for the accident which caused the death of two young men. They were impressed by those defense eyewitnesses who'd seen a light car, like the brothers, going south in the northbound lane. Only the 911 tape mentioned a dark car.
We had, was it 4 witnesses that come in and said that they were light colored cars? We never did have a witness come into court and say there was a dark colored car going the wrong way on 95.
It was either accept the science or accept the eyewitnesses.
Prosecutor Michael Horowitz worried about that very question as he waited for the verdict.
The case and what I was looking at was the science, the toxicology science, the accident reconstruction, the laws of physics science. All those things are scientific facts that can't be changed. And so I think that's something that I was hoping the jury would be able to look at and give more weight to than these 4 witnesses.
Good evening, everyone. There is a verdict tonight in the deadly wrong-way wreck trial.
After 2.5 days of arguments, a verdict.
The defendant is guilty of driving under the influence, a lesser-included crime. So say we all this 25th day of November, AD 2002.
What the legal phrase lesser-included crime meant was this. Farrell was guilty of being drunk and reckless, 2 misdemeanors, but not guilty of causing the fatal accident.
How many of you believe that Agent Farrell caused the accident, but you didn't believe the state proved it? And the other 3 of you?
I don't believe he caused the accident.
You think the young men caused the accident?
Yeah.
Why?
Based on the witnesses, the amount of witnesses that actually saw a light-colored, smaller car going the wrong way on I-95.
The verdict says there's reasonable doubt.
But not reasonable doubt in terms of him being drunk. So if he was drunk, doesn't it seem logical that he would be the one who caused the accident?
It would seem more logical for him to be the cause of the accident. But that has nothing to do with the facts. The fact is that it could have been either one of them driving the wrong way.
We did the best we could with what we were given, and we weren't given enough to achieve the truth, and that's a tragedy.
After the verdict, Farrell left the courtroom and was asked by reporters if he had anything to say to the families of the victims.
But I spent pretty much my entire life helping and trying to save people's lives, and you know, it's sad for everybody, and hopefully they'll find some peace and comfort in the future, and my thoughts and prayers are with them.
Farrell was sentenced to 90 days in jail. A career over, reputations tarnished, and a family devastated. And now, along a stretch of I-95 in Florida, most drivers speed by the one reminder of what happened here. A plaque with the names of Maurice Williams and Craig Chambers, a plaque that marks the spot where two promising young lives were lost.
I don't know when I'm going to stop hurting. I don't know when. As a matter of fact, this Saturday coming, it's Craig's birthday. He would have been 23. I was just imagining what he looks like at 23. We sat down on Christmas Day, and Christmas is always going to be hard for us.
Florence Thompson filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the FBI and Agent Farrell. A judge dismissed the case against the FBI while Farrell settled out of court. She also filed negligence suits against the Florida Highway Patrol and the bar where Farrell was drinking. The Highway Patrol settled. The case against the bar was dismissed.